Delightful strains of Mr. B. We have our afternoon test missions. This is vk3sl testing on 160 metres in a narrowband FM mode. Weekday and weekend missions abound. There is no end in sight. No, we keep things cycling on, and it's a bit of a Corona special, to be honest. We think there's something to be had in keeping the airwaves warm, something else for people to engage with. Of course, people engage on a technical level. They're all getting out their sets to slope detect or check out their FM receivers if you've got a more modern unit. Lots of ways to engage with these missions. And if you want to be entertained, there's also another platform for that. There's two streaming services running concurrently at the moment. We have our typical broadwave service, which can be found via my QRZ page. Just look that up. And my call sign up, vk3sl, and you'll find a reference to that. It's the go-to place for the broadwave streaming service, and now we're testing a YouTube streaming arrangement as well. So this is the third day of trying this one out. Seems to be holding up reasonably well. There's a lot of people using internet in the house at the moment, so will be interesting to see how it handles that. Whether there's any quality issues with the load, we'll see how it goes. But that can be found via my call sign as well as a discrete YouTube channel. So I've created a YouTube channel under my call sign, all in lowercase. At this point in time, it may not be that easy to find because there's a bit of a triage system with YouTube, and it relies on links being established. So it's out there, and I might look towards creating a blog page as a go-to option. Finally, there's an email address as well associated with all of this. So if people do want to make contact, or if this is getting anyone's way, or if you have a complaint, or if there's anything that sort of feels uncomfortable, I'm happy to chat about it. And so you can email me on my call sign again, vk3sl@hotmail.com. So there's a few new dimensions to our interfacing with these afternoon, and of course there's evening missions as well. There's quite a bit. There's Mr. Stew's got his on Wednesday night. There's some on Sunday afternoon, and there's Mr. L has his on Saturday night on 147.475, and Friday nights I do the same thing as I'm doing here, but in a slightly more, I don't know, erratic fashion maybe, because it's very spontaneous. But we go crazy with old recordings, historic material, and that's late in the evening on Friday, 11:30 on the same frequency. So a few points of departure, a few points of connection, and you're more than welcome to become involved in some capacity. Perhaps you have a request, perhaps you have some particularly classical music, particularly historic recordings. That's sort of the way we do things. So yes, new dimensions. All right, today I'm thinking of putting together a program about, this is very ad hoc, but one musician who I keep coming back to and whose music inspires me a great deal is George Enescu, a Romanian composer. He was born in 1881 and died in 1955. He was something of a musical phenomenon, really, but I won't wax lyrical about that. You can look him up if you want to read about his extraordinary prowess as a musician. But he was a very humble man and very prolific composer and an extraordinary communicator as a conductor and as a violinist, and actually as a pianist as well. So I thought we might sample a bit of Enescu's art tonight. And we'll start with a recording of his famous Romanian Rhapsody No. 1. It's probably his most famous work. He wrote this when he was a teenager, and he grew to despair with it a bit, I think, because that's the piece he became associated with for his whole life. It's such a masterpiece, though. And in this instance, we've got a performance conducted by another Romanian. This is Constantin Silvestri. So we'll have a listen to a recording made in the early 1960s of Enescu's Romanian Rhapsody No. 1. And this is VK3SL testing. is vk3sl. Test missions on 160 metres in the narrowband FM mode. Also streaming online. You can find this transmission on YouTube. YouTube streaming under my call sign, vk3sl. And yeah, we've been hearing Mr. Enescu. He's very famous Romanian Rhapsody. And Rhapsody number 1 there, played by Silvestri. I think it was recorded about 1961, that record. And having a bit of a look at Mr. Enescu's art tonight. I won't give you too much biographical or I'll try and restrain myself from waxing lyrical. I can't help myself sometimes with this artist because his music is profoundly human. It's very touching. Anyhow, he was a wonderful fiddle player. He made quite a few recordings in the 20s and they're all extraordinary, but he kept playing right up until the end of his life. And I found recently a recording of him playing the Bach double concerto with Oistrakh, who was born much later. So Enescu was born about 1881 and Oistrakh was born in I think around about the time of the First World War. So the young and the older musician in tandem in a concert in Moscow in 1946. Enescu is sort of starting to fail as a player, but all the soul is still there, and his passion playing is omnipresent, really. So, yeah, and you'll hear the influence it has on Oistrakh. It's a most wonderful union. It's a magic performance. And fortunately, only the first two movements survive. It's an off-air performance. And so we'll have a listen to this now. Off Moscow radio, apparently. And this has only turned up in the last little while. It's quite exciting to hear. And yeah, great stuff. We're going to hear Bach's double concerto in D minor. The first and second movements. I'm vk3sl testing.
Concertul în re minor pentru două viol și orchestră de Johann
Excuse the malformations.
Vivace, largo ma non tanto, allegro. Soliști George Enescu și David Oistrakh, acompaniați de Orchestra Simfonică de Stat a Uniunii Sovietice. Dirijor Kiril Kondrashin.
Yeah, such a heartfelt performance of the Bach double. It's only the first two movements that survived from that. Unfortunately, the acetate for the third movement has not turned up. Recording made in Moscow in 1946, featuring George Enescu and David Oistrakh. And I think Oistrakh was young. He was only in his early 20s, I think. And Enescu would have been in his late 60s at that stage. So I feel quite inspired hearing the young and the old musician in union. All right. Unfortunately, we don't have the last movement, but we have a recording here lined up of Enescu, again a late recording of George Enescu playing, in this instance, the Bach Chaconne from the second partita in D minor, BWV 1004. This is the famous Chaconne. It's the epic grand movement of all. It's Bach's, one of his magnum opuses, I think. It's just so expansive and it's larger than life, and people still, it's a miracle, really. There's no other way to describe this piece of music. And and in the hands of Enescu, extraordinary things happen. He is at the end of his performing life here, and he is very arthritic and struggles in some ways, but he uses gypsy intonation throughout, and that in itself is a really interesting subject, and it's slightly exaggerated because he's older and he's emphasizing particular intervals, but architecturally there's a universe in this performance. It's so full of intrigue, and the sense of how he balances the whole thing. Enescu had a phenomenal memory. You could hear a long work once and play it back by memory. He had that ability, and so he knew this music holistically, and I think you'll get a sense of that in this performance. So let's have a listen to the partita number 2 for solo violin, the Chaconne, with George Enescu, recorded in 1949, and I'm vk3sl testing. transmission from vk3sl. And he just didn't want that last note to stop. There's so much soul and humanity in that playing. It's George Enescu playing the famous chaconne from Bach's second partita, BWV 1004. Yeah, such grounded playing. Wonderful stuff. Okay, we're testing here on 160 metres, and we're not entertaining, of course. It's just some sort of event. And people can use this modulated sound to test their receivers, of course, and I'm always testing and re-evaluating things here. In fact, I've got a new power supply in the system today, so we're trying it out. I was a bit wavery at first, but it seems to be holding up. It's another switch mode, but it will work on 40 amps continuous, although this is only drawing about 15. But I thought it might be a good contingency, so we'll see how it holds up. So far, so good. Back to the non-music. Enescu was one of the musicians who everyone who came in touch with him was somehow affected by him because of his dedication to his art and his insights, profound insights. He basically knew the entire corpus of Western music by memory, and as a conductor he was sought after, although he ended up really focusing on playing and composing more than conducting. But as a composer he wrote a lot of piano music. In fact, he wrote a lot of his output's quite prestigious. But at the same time, on his deathbed, he said he had 1,000 compositions fully formed in his brain, which he could never write down. He just didn't have the means to write them down. And one of the works that was never written down was his second piano sonata, a work that he played himself and he taught by rote to some students. But I believe that work was never committed to the page, although it has been. There are snippets of it. His third piano sonata, however, he did right down, and that work is still played. It's a most extraordinary piece of music. And the Romanian pianist Dinu Lepati was Enescu's godson, and Lepati died young. He died at the age of 33, but he was very devoted to his mentor. And here's a recording of the third piano sonata, opus 24. And listen to the middle movement. It'll absolutely, I find it spellbinding. But I'm prejudiced. This is vk3sl testing. This is a test transmission from vk3sl. Just heard Dino Lupati playing George Enescu's Piano Sonata number 3, Opus 24. A work of indescribable beauty. Won't try and wax the records too much. It's like a window into another universe. And how do you describe it? It's like seeing something that's perfect through a in another sphere. Anyhow, this is vk3sl testing on 160. Yeah, these are afternoon missions. This one's a little bit serious. I've sort of on a bit of a roll. Needed a change of pace from the workload. Only a few more days of this, and then it's back to the coal face. So we'll wait and see what happens with afternoon missions. Whether or not they're going to be practicable, I don't know. All right, so a little bit of a program dedicated to George Enescu, who was an extraordinary musician, profound communicator in my estimation. Here's a recording of him conducting the BBC, I think it's one of the BBC orchestras, and the Philharmonic, with Bach's Mass in B minor, just the Agnus Dei, and the last movement. So we'll hear this. This is incredibly special. It features Kathleen Ferrier, and it is perhaps one of the most beautiful sort of mixed meetings of great minds. Enescu, as an older man conducting, this is 1951, and Kathleen Ferrier is quite young. She was soon to die of cancer. It's very sad, but the sense of musical purpose is just profound. So we'll have a listen to this, and we'll write out with this, and you won't need to listen to me trying to find words to describe music that transcends reality. All right then, folks. We'll catch you tomorrow. vk3sl testing.